It is September 5th, 2024, and the Biden administration just kicked off a Russiagate 3.0. But all on one hand, they want to claim that there is some sort of election interference. When you actually get into the details of it, it looks like the Biden administration is trying to really go after RT in particular, amid claims that there are people who are acting as unregistered foreign agents receiving Russian funding here in the US. So, what does all of that actually mean for the world that we live in? And how does all of this relate to the current timing as we're watching Zelensky replace his foreign minister, among a few other government positions? And we're also watching Russian forces continue to advance around the key Donbas city of Pokrovsk. That's as Zelensky and Kiev and their incursion into Russia's Kursk region still continues to not play out how they initially seemed to think that it would. If only they were actually paying attention to the reality of things to see how much diverting forces into Russia could actually hurt them on the front lines. Well, we got into all of the latest earlier with a special guest, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is international relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Rachel, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Always good to have you. Now, I wanted to get your take on the latest comments. I know that Russian President Putin is at the Eastern Economic Forum today, and he's commented on a number of issues. He's taken some questions. I saw a video floating around the internet of him saying, oh yeah, you know, we back Kamala Harris, jokingly, right? Talking about the fact that previously he had said that he preferred Joe Biden, and now Biden has given his endorsement to Harris. He's also talked about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, given him credit for that recent prisoner swap we saw a few weeks ago. Will you take us through the latest on kind of what we're hearing from Putin during this event?
Okay, so Putin was to a degree tongue-in-cheek. It really, the Russian government, Putin, they have made more than clear multiple times that they don't think it really matters who is the president of the United States, that it doesn't change U.S. foreign policy, and then the rest is just domestic window dressing. But that being said, Putin has made comments previously that he felt that in some ways Joe Biden was preferable to Donald Trump simply because Joe Biden was a predictable Cold War era dinosaur. The Russian government knew exactly what he would do in any given situation. Joe Biden is a known entity. You know, he's been a senator heavily involved in foreign policy for decades now. They're well familiar with him. Well, Trump is a bit more erratic, and his position on any given issue might have more to do with whom he spoke to in the last 15 minutes than any type of consistency. And he continually gave out contradictory signals during both his campaign and his presidency last time between what he said and then what the Secretary of State and Defense Department that he hired to run his country did, often in contradiction with what he said. They felt that he's not predictable. And when you're dealing with the two most heavily armed nuclear powers on Earth, trapped in, you know, kind of game theory mad logic with each other, predictability is actually a good thing, right? Even if it's bad predictability, predictability is better than the opposite. So in that sense, it is possible that Putin still sees Kamala Harris as another, you know, rubber stamped Democratic leader who will follow exactly in the footsteps of Joe Biden and take all of her cues on foreign policy, which he obviously knows absolutely nothing about, or defense policy, from the Democratic establishment. And in that case, she might represent, again, that predictability that Trump, being, shall we say, an unorthodox figure, often in contradiction with the Republican establishment himself represents.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I know that, even those comments, and of course the timing of them, right? That comes as you have the Biden administration ramping up these claims of, I guess, claims of election interference, but not really. When you look at the latest sanctions that they've handed down, they say that they're targeting what they claim are 2 RT employees that are based in Russia. And they claim that there's some funding for a media group based in Tennessee here in the US. And so it's interesting to me when you look into those charges and you're going, okay, wait a second. You're just saying basically that there was some sort of Russian funding that was unaccounted for, that didn't get reported under the federal laws that are required as a foreign agent here in the United States. So that's what you're saying. But at the same time, the Biden administration is trying to take all of this and phrase it as, oh, this is all quote unquote election interference by, I guess, being critical of the US government, that somehow, I mean, how do you see all of the latest efforts by the Biden administration to, what it feels like, at least on my end, is to make Russiagate happen again?
Yeah, so RT and Sputnik have already been banned in Europe, right? You can't even access them on the internet without a VPN, and I believe ultimately, that's the same censorship that the U.S. is going through. They're going through hoops of doing an end run around the First Amendment and so forth, but they are taking the tack of punishing any Americans who might comment on RT that has views that in any way coincide with the views of the Russian government or that criticize the U.S. government. Right? Russia simply is not allowed to criticize the U.S. government. Russian media is the enemy. And I guess maybe that is a feather in the cap of RT and Sputnik, because they criticize the U.S. government and others to a degree that they obviously fear them, and they going after them, and they're not giving their own citizens the benefit of the doubt. You hear and you make up your own mind what the truth is. Now the U.S. government's going to tell you what the truth is. Those Russians are foreign agents, or the people who work with the Russians, the people who would talk to the Russians ever are foreign agents. And that's what it is. It's meant to apply pressure to Americans at this point, not to comment on RT. That's ultimately what it's about. It's a shall we say, a under the table way of continuing the job of shutting down Russian media in the United States. Russians and people and Americans who sympathize with Russia on any particular issue or criticism of the U.S. government or foreign policy are verboten. They're not allowed the same journalistic freedom that the regular Western media that would not criticize in such blanket terms the U.S. government, because they themselves are an instrumental part of the U.S. political structure as the fourth estate.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how, it's been about 2.5 years now since you had YouTube just ban RT and Sputnik completely here in the US, and I guess in the West as a whole. And so while you had that ban in place, it's like, okay, well, clearly, I guess it hasn't worked too well, because people are still seeking out these networks, still watching them, and you have the Biden administration still frustrated about it. And then to that end, they try to act as if, oh, well, there's some sort of election interference, that these are networks that are promoting one candidate over another. And it's like, not really. If you actually look and pay attention to what is said and put out there, that is not what's actually happening. But speaking of different candidates, I did want to ask you about the latest shakeup in the Zelensky regime over in Kiev, because you've got these reports that I guess it's that Zelensky's foreign minister has resigned, although it seems like there's some pressure on him to do so.
you resign or you're fired type of
Right.
resigning, right? Yeah, especially considering the fact that he was going to resign was announced by someone other than him, by the parliamentary speaker of Zelensky's own Servant of the People party in the Rada, actually. So you know, he was quite obviously forced out. Dmitry Kuleba, the outgoing foreign minister, he was a very bad diplomat. Let's be honest. Just in the last few weeks, he once again ticked off the pretty much the entirety of Polish society by once again denying the massacre of Poles by West Ukrainian nationalists that allied with Adolf Hitler in World War II and were responsible for genocide and massacres of Jews and Poles and ethnic Russians and leftists and basically any and every Ukrainian who didn't agree with their vision of a Banderite fascist Ukraine. He once again basically refused to acknowledge that genocide in a very public way, and that ticked off Poland once again. That the Polish government has been trying to keep that particular huge distinction between a Maidan regime that regards those same genocidal fascists as their founding fathers of their vision of what Ukraine should be, simply because the Poles hate Russia more at this particular point in time. So they've attempted to paper over it as much as they can, but Kuleba kept opening his mouth about it and causing them no end of problems. And specifically, Zelensky has already highlighted that he got rid of Kuleba because he failed to secure, to drive the Western countries hard enough on weapons deliveries. That he wasn't getting all the Patriots that was promised, that he wasn't getting the permission to use Western weapons, long-range missiles to strike inside Russia, and so forth. And they're saying that he didn't have the energy to drive through for more. There were also domestic political differences. I don't know that Kuleba and Zelensky ever particularly got along. There have been rumors for a long time that Zelensky wanted to get rid of him, but the U.S. kind of discouraged him from doing that. And now, I guess, with the Biden administration occupied primarily with the anointing of Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden apparently farmed out to retirement and in some country house somewhere, that they feel it now is the time to go through with that with little objection from the U.S. government. The one that's replacing him, Andrei Sabiga, he has for just a few months been the deputy foreign minister. Or one of the deputy foreign ministers. Before that, he was a deputy to Yermak, whom is the Zelenskys' very powerful Grey Cardinal chief of staff, whom many people in the country regard as really running Ukraine. And the fact that one of Yermak's creatures, as it were, is now in the leading the foreign ministry as well, I think that's a sign of consolidation of power by Yermak. The other appointments, I haven't heard all the replacements yet, but the other removals of office, environmental protection, strategic industries, these weren't, like, shall we say, the big ticket cabinet ministry items. They're still relatively minor. The other notable piece, is that the head of the Kiev regime's UAV, their unmanned services in the military, kind of their drone czar, he has been suspended in office because he's being investigated for treason, because evidently his wife has a Russian passport. So that has suddenly become an issue. You know, the fact that she visited Crimea once since 2014 or something of the sort. So the anti-Russian witch hunt has crept into even within the Kiev regime itself, and it's kind of a McCarthyite blacklist thing going on where people are still pointing fingers at each other. You spoke Russian just last week. You're a traitor. Well, they all spoke Russian a few years ago, but you know, that's neither here nor there, I guess. So the foreign ministry is the most significant shakeup, and I think it's a consolidation of power by Zelensky and those immediately around him.
Okay. And yeah, it's always interesting because I know a lot of times when it does come to these kind of sweeps that he does or these shakeups within his administration, it's all about corruption, right? It's Zelensky finally rooting out corruption. But when it comes to the timing, as right now we have Kiev weeks after launching this incursion into Russia's Kursk region, and although it has made some headlines here in the West, at the same time, you've also seen some significant Russian advances in the Donbass because it's Kiev that is having to take from their frontline forces to continue on with this little stunt that they are carrying out in the Kursk region. So what do you
now
make
the other way around? Now the other way around. They're transferring the people that they removed from the Donbass for Kursk. Now they're returning them to the Donbass because Pokrovsk has blown up. So these troops must really must not enjoy being shuffled around quite so much, because of course every time they're being shuffled around, they're being exposed to Russian long-range strikes as they're doing so.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that, well, the situation that they're in, but also with the leadership there, right? Who is making these calls? Just how bad is the situation for Kiev around Pokrovsk? And is that something that you think Zelensky and I guess some of his other members of government could likely be second guessing as to why they decided to go into Kursk in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, they've openly said at this point that if the goal was to get Russia to divert forces away from the Donbass, they've admitted that was a failure. Syrskyi himself said that. So there's no question there. If that was the stated goal, there are other goals that they have discussed that all also failed. So it really doesn't matter that just the fact that they're still attempting to hold on to it and double down on a failure is a testament to the stupid obstinacy of the regime being governed more by PR and info warfare concerns than really military strategy. And Russia should, you know, if your enemy is doing stupid things, don't stop them. That's the thing. Russia is actually absolutely in no hurry to push the incursion out of Kursk because they're out of defensive fortifications. They're in these podunk villages, and they're much easier to target there. And we've heard even from the Western media, Forbes did an assessment that the Kiev regime is losing, or they don't even have that many left to lose at this point. But in the months since, they lost Western military vehicles at a rate twice faster in Kursk than they were in the front on the Donbass. And now there certainly is going to be some level of recrimination for the Kursk failure. It has led to an operational crisis in the Donbass, not just with the cutting of the supply lines at Pokrovsk and Sleboda and Karakhova, but also past Pokrovsk, it's just steppe all the way to the Dnieper River. So that will open up huge operational space for Russia. And it is also leading to Russia reactivating the front just to the south on the Kiev regime's southern strong point in the Donbass region, the fortress town on a hill of Ugledar that has resisted Russian efforts to storm it some 4 or 5 times in the past. Well, now its supply lines are cut, and Russia is putting it into a pinchers that might turn into a complete envelopment. And the Kiev regime is going to be forced with either withdrawing the people from there, and it better do so very quickly, because there's a very already they'll have to use fields and country roads if to escape safely, or to order the troops that are there to stand and die, and we'll be left with another Mariupol Azovstal situation. So the crisis is still only expanding, and ultimately the Kiev regime, they're shuffling manpower here, there, to the incursion in Kursk, back from Kursk to Pokrovsk. Oh my God, Ugledar is breaking down too. They simply can't defend everywhere at once now. And the defense, this attempt to rush forces into Pokrovsk, is coming so late in the game that I believe that they will not be able to hold on to Pokrovsk for long. They may be able to hold it under concerted Russian attack for about a month or so, but that's it. The writing is already on the wall, and there's reports from Western media discussing with Kiev regime forces, troops, commanders. They already feel that Pokrovsk is lost, and they're already thinking about the defense of the Dnieper River, of Dnepropetrovsk, or Dnipro as they call it now. So I don't think that there's any possibility in the medium term that they'll be able to hold on to Pokrovsk. It's their hope now is just to make it cost as much as they can late in the game for Russia.
Yeah, certainly. A lot at stake here all around, and interesting to see the consequences of some of those actions playing out rather quickly here. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest international relations and security analyst Mark Sleboda. Thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. If you want to support my work, you can also check out my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. That's where you can sign up as a monthly paid subscriber and join the community there. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.